I'm gonna be like, oh god, that movie, click. It's no Catwoman.
Yeah.
We're going live right now. Just to warn you all. There we go. There's all of us right now. Yeah. I think
I mean, if I'm on record as saying Catwoman was a terrible movie, I don't mind. It's okay.
it was not. It wasn't fun. I haven't seen it. It wasn't fun.
I'm comfortable in my stance.
Yeah.
Did you see the entire thing?
No.
Okay.
Well then,
No.
could have turned around in the end. You don't know.
It all comes together.
Yeah.
In the last 5
You're
minutes.
like, whoa.
Well, I mean, to
Mind
be fair, Batman versus Superman kind of turned around in the last 10 minutes. So, it's not impossible.
Okay.
They're like, what
Did
were you
anybody
all
really think that
talking about
Superman was-
before we came in?
Hi everybody! Don't forget to
Did
say
people really think
hello,
Superman was dead?
and then I'll say hi back to you. Just a reminder: next week we've got Dr. Avi Loeb. So we're going to be. I don't know what we're going to talk about with Avi Loeb.
Can't imagine.
Yeah, he's not
Something
really
going
doing
on in the
much, is he?
news
Yeah.
that maybe we should cover with him. I don't know. Something anyway.
He was on SETI Live a couple of weeks ago. So if anybody wants to go watch that,
Yeah.
it's fiery.
Is it really?
Oh, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, he gets heated. It's great.
He gets heated, or was Seth interviewing him?
Seth was interviewing
Yeah.
him. Seth was remaining very like, okay, all right. And Abby just is like, he is very passionate about
Yeah.
people not taking the possibility of
Yeah.
out there science as feasible, as viable, as,
Yeah.
logical. It's like, why not? Like, you can't discount it. Stop putting your head in the sand and going, no, it's not happening.
Yeah.
This does not surprise me.
Yeah.
No, but
yeah.
I mean, he really makes his point well. I mean, I was a fan by the time I was over. I was like, okay, you know what? I'm a fan.
I'm really looking forward to it. I mean, I've interviewed him in the past several times, both on camera and also just like for articles that we're working on. And he's one of my favorite researchers out there, just for his breadth of the work that he does. And so I was mentioning this earlier this week that I'm going to have a very different conversation with him, because it's not at all going to be about, so you think Oumuamua is an alien solar sail? Because honestly, I don't care. And we've reported every nuance of it over at Universe Today. I'm interested in that what you just talked about. I'm really interested in this. What is the responsibility of scientists to be able to push for really interesting, kind of out there topics, as long as you can find a scientific basis?
Yeah, definitely talk to him about science and scientists trying, remaining open-minded.
Yeah. I don't.
Yeah, and he has a lot of wide-ranging interests too, so you could go all over the place with him.
Yeah. No. So that's the kind of stuff that I'm really interested in talking about, as opposed to him necessarily presenting the evidence that Oumuamua is an alien spaceship. Because I don't know. There's
Kind of beat that one to death, did we?
well, we have, and everybody has, right? Like, I'm sure everyone is just like, so you think what's Oumuamua? And like we can skip all that. Like, we can skip every piece of that story and get straight to the interesting part, because our audience is deeply knowledgeable about that. It's similar to what we'll be able to do today. We'll just skip all that. What's a star? What's a gate? All right. I'm going to say hi to Six Bob Ohms, Andrew Planet, Ben Kalo, Bob Moeller, Christian Woodland, Corey S., Eric One, Eureka Roberto, Gordon Dewis, Gap Stargate, wait, what? Horizon Brave, Ian Farquharson, Johnny J, Larry King, Nancy Graziano, Raj Luthra, Arjone, Sir Goosey, Stephen Hawkins, Susan Hunter, Tom Garcia, WW4BJ, Tom Van Scotter, Trey Harmon, Zappan, Zed Black Rider. Hey everyone, welcome. All right, let's get started. All right, I'm gonna put you all back into your boxes. Back to me. All right. Here we go. Hello and welcome to the Weekly Space Hangout for Wednesday, February 10th, 2021. I'm Fraser Kane, publisher of Universe Today. This week, we're going to be talking about Mars, and then we'll also talk about Mars, and then we'll also probably talk about Mars. We've got spacecraft arriving at Mars. We've got water on Mars. We've got an explanation for the weird landslides on Mars. Mars. Prepare yourself for Mars. Joining me this week, on my screen, I've got Beth Johnson. Hey, Beth.
Hey, Fraser, how's it going?
Good. Where are you?
I'm on Mars. This is a Pathfinder picture.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Is that Mount? No. What's that mountain in the background? Oh, forget the
I don't
name
remember.
of that mountain.
I just
Twin
read the
Peaks.
description.
I think it's
Twin Peaks.
I think
That's
it's
it.
Twin Peaks.
Twin
yeah.
Peaks.
Yeah, Twin
Yeah.
Peaks.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay. Yeah.
That's it. Thank you.
Oh man, I loved watching the Pathfinder missions back in the day. That was like the first time I watched something live happen on the internet. It was like 97, I think. And NASA was doing a great job of streaming the Pathfinders. So anyway, I'm reminiscing now. We've got Carolyn Collins-Peterson. Hey, Carolyn.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. You're not on Mars. Where's
No,
our
I
theme
should have
here?
done that. No, I'm in my office at 9,200 feet in the Rockies.
Yeah. And we got Michael Roderick. Hey, Michael.
Hello, good to be back. I'm just in my room. I'm nowhere.
Yeah, no.
It's
That's fine. It's fine. All right. So before we get on to our special guest, I just want to give a huge thank you to our good friends at the Weekly Space Hangout crew. They are, of course, our executive producers. They're friends, really our family. They keep each other company over the long summer when we go on hiatus and talk about space news without us. And they are the ones who bring on all the really cool guests. So if you've ever wanted to be really an executive producer in the space news industry, join the Weekly Space Hangout crew. They'll give you your business card, all the credentials you could ever need to bring on super interesting guests here on the show. So go to wshcrew.space and they will set you up. Speaking of really interesting guests, we've got Joseph Mallozzi. Hey, Joseph, welcome to the Weekly Space Hangout.
Hello, thanks for having me.
So who are you? What do you do?
I am an occasional executive producer, showrunner, writer. My last show was a show called Utopia Falls. The one before that was a series called Dark Matter. And the big one before that was a series of shows in the Stargate franchise, SG-1, Atlantis, and Universe.
When did you start working on the Stargate shows? When did you join the team?
It was for the show's SG-1's fourth season, which
Right.
was, I think, around 1999. And it was with the understanding that the show would go a fifth season, and then we'd all go our separate ways. And
Yeah.
of course, that 2-year gig turned into a 12-year, glorious 12-year run.
Movies, spin-off franchises, et
Yes,
cetera,
yes.
et cetera. Yeah.
Yes.
Why isn't there any Stargate right now?
That's a really good question. Direct all questions and comments and requests to MGM. Right now, I can tell you that Brad Wright, who had a hand in creating all 3 of the Stargate shows, is working on developing a new series. Whether that series will be bought and will see the light of a TV or laptop screen someday is anybody's guess. It's just crazy how Hollywood works. But I'm hopeful. I think if anyone could pull it off, it's Brad.
What is the sort of the state of the franchise? So what, MGM owns it? Are they, which television studio are they connected with? Where would it go?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, the nice thing about the fact that they're not connected, it would be great if they were connected to a broadcaster, in which case they would say, here, put this on the air.
Yeah.
But they're not. So what they will do is, once Brad is finished, with his script and with his presentation, they'll go out to, I assume, everywhere, to Amazon, to Apple, to Netflix, to Peacock, and try to set it up and see who's interested.
Yeah, you've been watching, before we started the show, we were talking about our sort of favorite recent sci-fi shows, a lot of stuff that we're watching as well. How do you feel like the that the world of science fiction has been doing in the last couple of years. It feels to me like a real renaissance.
Yeah, I would agree. In some ways, yes. I find, to be honest with you, some of the more interesting, I think, genre fare coming out of Asia. We discussed shows like Alice in Borderland and Sweet Home. And then, obviously there are excellent sci-fi shows like The Expanse. I just find that shows like the classic Star Trek and Stargate SG-1 and Atlantis and Farscape as well had a certain tone that I think sci-fi fans, or the really diehard sci-fi fans, tend to really appreciate. It's I won't call it a lightness, but there's a humor that runs throughout, and a sense of camaraderie and hope that you'll see in like a movie like Guardians of the Galaxy, which we don't really see on TV in sci-fi. And I notice it missing because, I worked in the genre for so long. And, I'm just wondering how long it's going to take for the executives out there to sort of catch on that it's missing.
Well, it's kind of a cycle, though. Like, I think we see it in like comic book movies where everything is so light, and then someone says like, this is too sugary. We need to go dark. And so then you get Dark Knight and things like that. And then someone says, like, okay, we need to make it happier again. Let's bring it back to more of the Marvel Universe type stuff. And I definitely can see that we've shifted over into the kind of gritty realism, but it's possible. But I don't know, I've been raving about The Expanse year after year after year, but I've also been raving about Orville, which is light and happy and is like one of my favorite Star Trek shows. So I think there's sort of room for all kinds. Where would you like to see Stargate go?
Creatively?
Yeah.
The real challenge of launching a new Stargate series is the fact that we did 17 seasons of television. It's so mythologically dense. I mean, to be honest with you, one of the biggest challenges of producing the show was bringing on new writers, because there was, that we had so much backstory to tell, to mine, and it's kind of overwhelming. So, you want a series that is a great jumping off point for new viewers. But on the other hand, you don't want to do a reboot, I would argue, because in that case, you're wiping out, those 17, 20 years of canon, and you're angering a lot of the established fan base. So I think the best of both worlds was, you would just introduce a new team, a new Stargate team who doesn't know about the gate, and you essentially pepper in familiar faces. Amanda Carter could, Samantha Carter, Amanda Tapping plays Samantha Carter, could be head of the SGC, or, Rodney McKay could be working at the SGC. You could, slowly but surely over time introduce old friends and kind of establish storylines. It can be done. It's a challenge.
Yeah.
Sure.
I was also mentioning to you before we started the show that I've started going through all the shows as well. My wife's a huge sci-fi fan, and we've been sort of filling in the missing pieces of each other's backstories. So we watched Deep Space Nine, which we hadn't watched in. I only watched a little bit of it, and we both, everyone's like, no, you got to watch them all. You really love them, and we did, and it was great. Yeah. And I've have a really special, but the fans of this show know I really love Stargate, and I sort of put one of the things that I really love about it was that it goes from the beginning of the show, of the series, even season one, they're starting to sort of understand the wider universe that they live in. They're starting to get their hands on interesting pieces of technology, different discoveries about how the politics work and so on, and then they're putting it to use. And by the end of the run, they've got a fleet. They've got the capability. They are a player in the Milky Way, and it deepens even with what happens with Atlantis and universe. And I loved that. Like, I just loved this idea that you got to watch them go from a backwater planet to a player on the scene. Was that like intentional to sort of tell that story and remember all of the stuff they had learned?
Well, to be honest with you, as I said, we only expected to do 2 more seasons and out.
Yeah.
And every year we would get picked up, we always assumed it would be our last year, until, SG1's 10th season. That was the only season I was actually convinced we'd be back for an 11th season, and that was the year we were canceled. But speaking to sort of what you said, sort of as sort of the series evolves, you grow the characters, you grow the stories, and by necessity you have to grow the technology. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it would be almost a battle, like the Asgard beaming technology, for instance. Once we had that, that was a huge game changer. I remember Ben Browder would basically come into my office and he'd be like, oh, we have to get rid of that beaming technology. It's so undramatic. Like, send some red shirt down and have them, appear on the planet in a puddle of protoplasm or something.
Yeah.
So I mean, you always had to kind of walk that line.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure that's tricky that you get this kind of capability inflation for the team that every new piece of technology that they're able to integrate into their system, like naked reactors and beaming technology and replicator stuff, that you're able to trivialize encounters, and it makes you need to, I don't know, have to have get a lot more creative about the kinds of threats that you face. Have you had a chance to read the 3-Body Problem?
No, not yet. In fact, I'm a fairly avid reader, but last year, even though I had so much free time, I actually accomplished very little. I read very little. I wrote very little. Surprisingly.
Yeah, it was a bad year. Mm-hmm. I highly recommend it as a chance to sort of read a story that just goes to the nth degree, that takes that concept of this sort of capability inflation to infinity. And so, the first book is actually kind of a tough slog. Second one blows your mind, and then the third one accelerates the parts that have already been blown to light speed. So I do highly recommend it. How do you sort of, what else are you working on right now? You worked on, we were talking about Stargate, and obviously I'll just, I could talk about Stargate all day. You worked on Dark Matter. You worked on Utopia Falls. What else are you working on right now?
A lot of development. One of the shows I'm actually developing now is an adaptation of a fantasy series. It's a subgenre of fantasy called Flintlock fantasy, and it's, to be honest with you, I'm not a huge fan of magic in the books I read or the movies I watch or the TV I watch, just because once you introduce magic, unless you're very specific about the rules, you can do anything. It feels like very kind of Deus Ex Machina result writing. But the thing I liked about this series is they're very specific about the rules of magic, and it's all based really around gunpowder and the ability to affect gunpowder, to guide bullets. It's almost like an alt Napoleonic era sort of historical drama.
Right.
And so basically I'm working on that. I'm working on actually a couple of other shows, developing a couple of other shows. One of them is kind of a crazy, we were talking about our affection for Japanese and Korean television. It also extends to sort of my appreciation for Korean music, specifically K-pop. So actually, it's crazy, but I pitched a sci-fi gaming K-pop
that's
series.
Awesome.
And they bought it. So I just delivered the first the first draft of the pilot a couple of days ago, and we'll see how that goes. So really, I'm just juggling a bunch of different projects. I've got two time travel projects, two completely different time travel projects that we're going out and pitching right now. But in this business, you always have to have so many projects, so many balls in the air, And ultimately, it's never the one you expect to go that gets the green light, if any get the green light.
Has the landscape changed because of all the streaming platforms have come in? I mean, the joke on South Park is that they're just giving away mountains of money to anyone who's got any idea to fund it. But I think there's more scripted television shows now than like there have ever been. So is it a good time to be making, apart from the pandemic, pretend the pandemic doesn't exist, which I know is really difficult. Is it a good time to be getting into this industry, do you think?
I think it's an equally good time as it used to be. I think, one of the things that we were talking about before we came on the air was you mentioned the fact that what a great idea it is to adapt an IP, intellectual property, like a book, like a comic book. And this is something that I think executives are fixated on, but really it's hard to get an original idea picked up unless you're J.J. Abrams. Mm-hmm. However, if you come in with a book or a comic book or an interesting real life story, that will increase your odds.
Yeah. I mean, I think the other show that we're watching is Battlestar Galactica again, mm-hmm. and that sort of starts great and then just ends in just falling into pieces and just breaks our heart in so many ways, and that is because they didn't know where they were going, and they they were like, the Cylons have a plan, and like, no, they don't. They don't have a plan. No one has a plan here. It's like Lost. No one has a plan. No one knows what they're going to do. They're just going to make it up as they go along. And I think that's the advantage of adapting a book, is that someone someone did all the hard work of making a story hang together from beginning to end, which is maybe one of the hardest parts of telling a story.
I will propose that a good creator and showrunner can do that without having to rely on source material. Now, may I recommend a series called Dark Matter on Netflix, 3 seasons, tonally very similar to Stargate Atlantis and Stargate SG-1, but it was a series that I was developing when I was on Stargate, and every year we kept on getting picked up. So the luxury of time I had allowed me to really develop the storylines and the characters. So, we're doing a rewatch, sort of kind of an every Monday night rewatch with fans, and fans will notice that things that I seeded elements in episode 3 that don't pay off till like the first episodes in season in season 3, episode 3 to season 3.
That's amazing.
And with proper preparation, you can do that. But Lost, for instance, kind of lost me for this, for kind of the same reason. I realized you're just kind of making it up as you go along. And I mean, that's fine as long as you don't contradict what came before.
Yeah.
But more often than not, you do. And then, you kind of lose your audience.
It's funny. Like my daughter is a huge fan of Supernatural, and she loves it, and she's also just enraged by it. And I said, well, the reason is because they don't know what they're doing. They don't have any story. They're way beyond their plan, their plan 10 years ago. And so now they're just like, the person who was the bad guy last season, they're the good guy this season. It's professional wrestling, right? And so I think that's got to be tricky. Like when you think about things like, I don't know, Breaking Bad or whatever, that it's tricky, that you've got to show that you are trying to tell a story beginning to end, and you've got to get people to commit to that entire run. That's tricky, as opposed to singing for your supper every season.
Getting fans to commit is one thing. Getting a network to commit is something completely different. I mean, when I approach, again, I mentioned Dark Matter because that's kind of my baby. I approach each season like an installment in a book series. So each season deals with a different theme. There's a beginning, middle, and end. And I really planned it as a 5-season series, and we ended up only getting 3, which is kind of unfortunate.
Right. So you have the story written down somewhere of where it's all going to go, but
It's all up here.
It's all right.
All
sure.
up here. Yeah.
Right. So do you think, people are talking in the chat about maybe there's a way you can bring back dark matter? Is there any hope for that?
I think, yeah, I mean, anything's possible. I hold out hope for a miniseries someday.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Are there any like IP, any ideas out there that you would love to work on? An adaptation of a show where you're just like, man, I wish someone would let me get my
I would really
hands on that.
I like to do my own Star Trek.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I would just, I grew up on the classic Star Trek, and we talked about the fact that Star Trek is very similar in my mind to what we did in SG-1, what we did on Atlantis, what I did on Dark Matter, Star Wars, Guardians of the Galaxy. And it's a hopeful sci-fi, and it's fun, and that's what I would like to see more of. And I mean, having grown up on Star Trek, it's kind of near and dear to my heart.
It is interesting. I mean, even just like the Picard that's on right now and Star Trek Discovery, they're good, but they don't feel like Star Trek in the same way that Star Trek felt like Star Trek. That even Deep Space Nine felt that way. That Voyager felt like that. But for some reason, the new ones don't feel like that in the way the Orville does. So I don't know what it is what the secret sauce is that you blend into the Star Trek to make it feel right. But for some reason, the new ones, although they're entertaining shows, I don't know, they don't really kind of trigger the same feelings for me. I know what you mean. I know exactly what you mean. Wonderful. So if people want to sort of see what you're working on, follow your trials and tribulations, where should they go to be able to see more of what you're doing?
They can come over to my blog, josephmallozzi.com, where I've been blogging every day for 13 years.
Nice.
And usually offer insights on what I'm working on, usually behind the scenes pics if I'm in production, or videos of my 16-year-old pug. Or you can find me on Twitter, Joseph Mallozzi, or at Baron Destructo.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for coming and chatting with us today. And seriously, good luck. Like, if there's anything we can do to bring back any of these shows, just let me know. We'll pull all the strings that we need to be able to get you more seasons. We have so much influence here at the Weekly Space Hangout. You have no idea. Joseph,
thank you.
Pleasure to talk to you.
Very much.
Good luck, and thank you for entertaining us for all these years. We really appreciate it. Like it's an honor to talk to you and to be able to sort of peer behind the mind who was keeping me entertained for all those years.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
All right, take care.
See you.
All right, let's move on to the space news portion of this week's episode. And like I said, Mars. Michael, you're on my screen. What have you got for us?
All right, so we got a bunch of spacecrafts about to go to Mars. So there were 3 missions that were launched around July, which are now arriving at Mars. So just today we had the Tianwen mission from China enter orbit. The other day we had the Hope mission from the United Arab Emirates. And then next week, I think actually Perseverance is supposed to land the 18th. And that one's cool because that one has a helicopter. And that's really all I know about that mission is it has a helicopter.
That's all you know about Perseverance is that it's got a helicopter? Really?
It's an important fact.
Yeah. Sure, but there's maybe more to it than that it has a helicopter.
It's going to do science.
Yeah,
too,
whatever. It's going to do science. If it's not about galaxies, you're not interested. All right. So let's talk about the missions. So let's talk about the first one to arrive was the UAE mission.
Yes. So that one is it's different than what's gone to Mars before. So a lot of the missions that we've sent to Mars have been either landers or rovers or orbiters, which are kind of mapping out the surface of Mars. The Hope mission is looking more at the atmosphere of Mars, trying to do a kind of global picture of the entire planet. So this one is going into a very elliptical orbit. It's going to be about 20,000 kilometers at its closest approach. And you can compare that to like the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, which is that 300 kilometers orbit. That's a nice circular orbit. So pretty different. And so that they are trying to figure out what's going on with the dust in Mars. How does the dust affect the atmosphere, the weather of Mars? We know that Martian atmosphere has dissipated across millions of years. Mars used to have a very thick atmosphere. It doesn't anymore. Can they try to figure stuff out about what has happened to the atmosphere? And this one is really interesting, I think, because it was funded by UAE. It was built in University of Colorado and launched from Japan. So a very kind of international network of scientists who went into that project.
Perfect.
And then we have the Chinese mission, and they are going for the whole thing. They got an orbiter, a lander, a rover. They're just I mean, they land on the dark side of the moon. They're miles ahead of where NASA was when NASA started, right? And so they have a rover as well. Theirs is going to be kind of like the Spirit and Opportunity rovers. And so their goal is also similar. They want to look for water, want to look for signs of life on Mars. And that one, the rover is going to be there for about 3 months. The mission.
The interesting. Sorry. Oh, I don't know if you can talk about the one big distinguishing feature about the rover on the Chinese rover is that it has a ground penetrating radar system. Oh, you're going to get into that. Okay. Sorry, I'm spoiler alert.
I was going to mention that it does. It can actually look a few hundred feet into the ground of Mars, and I think back to the mole that we had in the InSight lander, which was supposed to dig itself into the surface of Mars, and didn't quite work, unfortunately. So yeah, this is something that I have not seen or heard before. And
nobody's ever done this. So this is China's new piece of the puzzle that they're bringing to the table, and they actually did this with their Chang'e 5. Their mission on the moon, as you said, on the far side of the moon, is that they had a ground penetrating radar, and they were able to essentially scan how deep the regolith goes and be able to sort of see what it looks like. And they were able to look down through the regolith and see that it's actually very deep and starts out as this fine powder and then turns into larger and larger chunks until it's rubble fairly far down, but like dozens of meters down. And so they're going to have a very similar technology that's going to be on their rover doing kind of the same thing, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, and they will be, I believe, only the U.S. has successfully landed a rover or lander on Mars, which transmitted scientific data back to Earth. I think the Soviets landed one on Mars, but the transmission was obviously not scientific. It's just like glitchy and everything. So getting to Mars is hard. Getting to land on Mars is hard. So this is impressive.
Yeah, Mars eats spacecraft for breakfast.
Yeah. And I believe China's essentially done this all on their own. Like most other missions are collaborative with other nations. Most everything that's on this mission is homegrown.
Yeah, no. I mean, all the lunar stuff they're doing. No, they're completely on their own. There's the Chang'e 5, their orbiter. They had an orbiter that was on the I forget what it was called. Anyway, they had their orbiter that was on the far side of the moon. It had a Dutch radio experiment on board, but apart from that, no, they're doing everything on their own because they're locked out of various international collaborations, so they can't work with NASA at all on anything. Right. But now they've done sample return. Next up comes they've done sample return from the moon. So let's talk about Perseverance. Apart from the helicopter,
So I will admit, Perseverance is the one that I know the least about. I know that it is. It's similar to Curiosity. It's going to be another kind of big style SUV rover, and then that one is coming down on the 18th. And they plan these missions for a few years, but they always end up seeming to.
Anyone want to jump in and help them out?
So Perseverance, it's actually the first rover that they're sending down to with the actual mission of looking for signs of life. So this is a really big deal. This is actually NASA-backed astrobiology research. This is not just, we'll see what we find. This is, no. It's going to go dig into the soil of Jezero Crater and see if it can find evidence of past or current microbial life, fossils, anything it can find. And so that's like the big deal on this one. And yeah, it's got another one of those wonderful crane landings with the whole thing. One of the things I saw on Twitter this week that just had me laughing is, here's the United Arab Emirates, and it comes up and it just drops itself into orbit very gently, and China drops itself into orbit very gently, and we'll send a lander down, and it's like, and in comes the United States with we're gonna just like
straight shot,
straight shot with a crane and the whole 9 yards, and it's like, that's
7 minutes of terror. No need to break. Yeah.
It's actually longer than that right now because Mars is farther away from us. So it's actually, I think, on the order of 11 to 12 minutes of terror now. So we have to wait even longer this time around.
Well, I think the 7 minutes of terror was the time that it took from the moment it hit the atmosphere to the moment it hit the surface.
Well, it was also the fact that you didn't know. So it was the 7 minutes of transmission time between Earth and Mars. So we had no idea.
Right.
So it was basically 7 minutes of, I don't know.
Yeah. So Michael, what do you know about the helicopter?
That one, man, I gotta admit, I don't know a whole lot about it either. Perseverance, I feel bad for NASA and the US. I kind of skipped over you guys.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Yeah.
Interest in the other countries.
Well, I think it's good. I mean, other people aren't talking about it, so I think for you to bring that up, that's fine. Beth?
It's a test helicopter. It's a test. It's to see if they can actually do this, if they can pull this off. So it doesn't really have a lot of instrumentation on it. It has to do a lot of testing to make sure that it can survive the trip, make sure that it can survive the entry, survive the landing, and then get out and charge the batteries. And then they'll see if they can actually send it commands and get it to move around. But it doesn't really have any scientific instrumentation. It's kind of a very expensive proof of concept.
How place your bets. How many flights do you think it gets before it crashes? My guess is 1.
I'll give it 2.
You give it 2?
Yeah.
How?
All right, I'm gonna take the over on that. So anything over 2.
Over
is mine,
2, yeah.
I'm gonna be generous.
Yeah, I mean, just like you take a drone. First time you fly a drone, you crash it. So it's inevitable at this point.
It feels very much like a Kerbal Space Program mission where, I'm going to throw a helicopter on that lander. Why not?
Yeah, there's room.
Yeah, who knew?
So David Dunn is noting in the comments that there's a microphone on the rover too. So this is amazing. This is the first time that we will hear what Mars sounds like. And the Planetary Society has been trying for, I think, decades to try to get a microphone on any space mission going to Mars. There was spacecraft that they were able to get it on that crashed. There was spacecraft that it was cut because of weight and price cost restrictions. And this is the first one. And so after Perseverance arrives on Mars, we're going to hear the sounds of Mars, the wind blowing, the sand rustling, the helicopter taking off, the echo of the
crash landing
of the rover. Yeah, we'll hear the crash. It'll be like, wait for it. There.
It'll be interesting to hear how the crash is attenuated by the atmosphere.
Yeah, exactly. There'll be so much science they'll be able to do as it crashes onto the surface. They'll be able to hear it. Yeah. Super exciting. I know a lot of people are planning to do like watch parties for it. Mm-hmm. So there should be. I know. Are we doing anything with CosmoQuest, Beth? There's got to be a plan, right?
I can't speak to that because I am doing one with SETI.
Oh,
so
okay.
We actually have an entire watch party for SETI Live the day of, and we will be having guests from SETI Institute, JPL, Planetary Society, all over the place. We've got a pretty incredible lineup, actually.
That sounds amazing. Okay, well then I'll watch that. That sounds great.
I was excited, and I'm one of the hosts, and I'm still kind of going, how did this happen?
Yeah, that's fantastic. Wonderful. All right, Beth, well, you're on my screen, so tell me more about Mars.
Okay, so in this case, this is a press release that came out of SETI Institute. And what it is there are these lines that we have studied on Mars. They're called recurring slope lineae. Because everything has to have a 3-letter acronym. So everybody just refers to them as RSLs. And we've been wondering what causes them for a long time. And because, there's not a lot of wind, there's not a lot of water. Obviously, there's not a lot of surface water. There's not a lot of erosion. So what's causing these landslides? And they happen seasonally too. So that makes them very interesting. And what this team has done has gone out and done some Mars analog research, as well as studying the images from the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter. And they went to Antarctica, they went to the Dead Sea, and they went to the Atacama Desert. And they looked for places that had similar sort of soil compositions, where there's salt and there's chlorates, and how these interact with water. And what they found was this semi-frozen slush water, when it just heats up just enough, it can melt, and then it sort of lubricates all of the particles, and then they go sliding downhill, because basically it lessens that friction. So all of a sudden they're not held together by this frozen water ice. They're just kind of like, oh, look, slushy, whoosh. And so that's what's causing it. And the change of the water temperature revealing the surface, the subsurface grains, is causing the changes in color too. So it's pretty cool.
Well, I mean, this has been a controversy for a long time. I remember when this news first broke, and the story was liquid water seen on the surface of Mars for the first time. And that in the springtime on Mars, you were seeing these fresh, it looked like liquid pouring down the side of the crater.
So much darker that it looks like, these have to be wet to do that.
Yeah. And so the idea was that there was like some kind of reservoir of water that was being sliced by the side of this crater wall, and the angle was right. And then as the springtime heated up, then you got water pouring out of these underground reservoirs and dumping down the slope. And then you got people going, that could just be rock. That could just be a landslide. That it's just dirt falling, and the dirt on the surface is one color, and the fresh dirt that hasn't been exposed to the sunlight is a different color, and that perfectly explained it as well. And then you got more exotic ideas, like you got like, oh, it's like some kind of like gas underneath that is bubbling out and exploding to the surface. So what would this stuff be like? Like if you could sort of like take a good close look at it under the surface, what would it look like?
Like a slush. There's in the press release that we put out, there's actually a pretty good picture of it, what they did in the lab, and how it looks like a slush ball. So it's you can see how it darkens, and that was pretty much how they kind of really went about figuring it out. Was not only did they do all of this in situ stuff in Mars analog sites, there's another great picture they have of this gypsum cave in Chile, where there's all of this surface gypsum, which is a salt, and the underneath is gone. It's basically like the water underneath warmed up, melted, and then sort of evacuated itself. So now there's these caves down there, and so it's just one of those things where the way it interacts with the salt, and there's a short video on the website too, so I'm gonna push that, but you can actually see how the water melting. Keep in mind, these are not Earth temperatures by any stretch, but the way it interacts just kind of creates this slush underneath, and it darkens, and then what that allows is those grains on the surface to kind of slide down over the top of it.
But I'm assuming it's not case closed. Like someone else will have another proposal. We got to wait for the astronauts, or I guess maybe the helicopter, to go over and crash into it to tell us more.
Yeah, when I've done the headlines for it, I've always kind of put a question mark, because it's like, well, we've possibly solved it, but we've said this. People have said this before, so no one wants to get too far ahead of themselves here.
Does this explain the slope lineae on Mars? Does that explain? Yeah, I know the feeling. Very cool. All right, Carolyn, I want to switch gears and talk about Mars.
Okay, yeah, we haven't talked about Mars in what, 30
Well,
seconds
you've got
now. So
Mars
yeah.
now. You have moved to Mars. Good.
All right. Yes, I
Yeah.
did. Yeah, so I was just thinking about this when you guys were talking about the spacecraft. There's something like a dozen spacecraft at Mars that are sending back after this week. And I think that's really impressive. A bunch of years ago, I did a full dome show about Mars, an immersive documentary, and we talked about landers and rovers and mappers. And the only thing we didn't think of was a helicopter. So that's kind of cool. That'll be part of Perseverance. So all these missions are returning data, and that's giving us a lot of information about Mars, which we're hoping to use for human landing eventually someday. And it's giving mission planners and planetary scientists a lot to think about. And so the big thing is water. We've been talking about that. Everybody wants to know how much water is available. And of course, explorers, if you're going to land there, you're going to need it for life support. You're going to need water to drink. You're going to need, grow those potatoes, right? that we saw in the Martian. But you can also use the water for propulsion. You can use it to search for life on Mars, because if there's even microbial life, it's likely going to be near sources of water, even if it's ice. So there's a big need to map all the water sources. And here's all this data sitting here that we can use to do that. Now, we know about the polar caps. Everybody thinks, oh, there's a lot of water, at least at one of the polar caps, probably both. There are these hydrothermal systems that are deep underground. But if you're an explorer, you really can't get to the caps. Those are a little tough to get to. That's tough to land there. And also, if you have something that's deep underground, like the 200 meters the Chinese are going to find, that's going to be a little hard to dig to. So what you want to do is send your people to the mid-latitudes, kind of where US and Europe are, or where Northern Africa, South America, maybe. Those are easier to get to. So there's all this data that has already come down from the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, from Mars Odyssey, Mars Global Surveyor. And a team at the Planetary Science Institute has said, okay, let's take a look at all this data. And they've started applying new data processing to this data. And they came up with a technique called the subsurface water ice mapping. And I love the acronym, it's SWIM.
Oh, that's cool.
And the data sets have information from, there's imaging, there's radar mapping. They can look at surface features and tell something about how those surface features formed. If they formed in the presence of water, that would be interesting to know. They're also using existing radar data, which I'm hoping the Chinese will share their deep radar data, but we have existing radar data that give you kind of a shallow look beneath the surface, and they've mapped paraglacial features. So there's all that data available. One of the things I found kind of interesting was this neutron spectrometer that gives you an idea of how much hydrogen, what the hydrogen is interacting with the topsoil, presumably belying the presence of water, at least in the form of ice. So they're essentially, they're taking all these different aspects, and they're, when I was reading the press release, they were saying if we get a positive from 5 different data sets that's pointing to ice, then they've got a place where people could land to take a look at, to do this. So 5 data sets tell you, okay, these are the best places to go and land. One of the places that was mentioned is a place called Deuteronomus Mensi, which is, I think, about 43 degrees latitude. And that's a place where you could send your people. They can dig down just a few centimeters, maybe a little bit more than that, maybe a meter, and they can find water ice. And that would be able to then give them what they need for water for, growing their potatoes, whatever they need to do.
Yeah, specifically growing the potatoes.
Yeah, you got to have the potatoes, Mars potatoes. But of course, one of the things, you get all the way down to the bottom of the press release, and you get to the need more data part of it, which is we need more robust mapping. There are still holes in the data all over the planet. And I think before they can even say, okay, we're going to land people at this place, or the Deuteronomus Mensi, or wherever they're going to go, they're going to need to have more data. And that's where I'm sort of hoping that the rest of for example, the Chinese would share their data eventually, and that we get, quite a bit more radar mapping done in the future, and other things that we could do to do surface penetration to find some of the layers of ice.
Yeah. So, do you think that there will be a time when explorers on Mars will be able to access this water relatively easy for refueling their spaceship? Is it the kind of thing that you think could be done in an automated fashion, or is it still going to require some earth-moving equipment?
I've actually seen plans for both, and it could be done, but they're really going to need to pick and this is really complex. I mean, they're really going to need to pick their landing sites really well. And that's why they need more data. I mean, we always need more data, right? But they need a lot more data to be able to say, okay, we can step out here and we can dig a meter, maybe. And of course, how far you have to dig and what the topology is like is really going to determine what tools that you bring along to be able to do that. If you've got to have some big subsurface drill, that's one thing. But if you can just step out and dig a few, maybe no more than a meter down, then that's going to be a lot easier. Now I'm thinking now about the InSight lander, which you guys just mentioned, and they had a hard time digging even a foot, a few, 8 centimeters or something like that.
Well, definitely trying to have the mole go down with its system, but right. There was the polar lander. It was able to use its scoop and dig into the ground pretty nicely. That okay.
I think that was it must have been lucky that they had a fairly easy place to dig into. But to answer your question, I think it's possible, but they need more data.
What do you think about planetary protection, though? I mean, if this water is so readily available, then it's easily infectable with our filthy Earth life.
Yeah, that's really a good question. I don't personally feel like they're taking it seriously enough. I mean, right now with the spacecraft, yes, they are going through cleaning processes and they are trying to make them as safe as possible. But when you send humans, that's just a whole other biome of stuff that you're sending to the surface. And you can't sterilize humans and send them. Yeah. So it's going to be a problem.
There wouldn't be much
you could
left.
Send them through that UV and hope they're alive at the end of it. But
So I'm going to switch gears a little bit. Thank you, Carolyn.
Sure.
I'm going to switch gears briefly and talk about 2 things that I think are kind of interesting. One is a potentially gigantic piece of news that's breaking today. And this is that astronomers think they might have found a super Earth in the habitable zone of Alpha Centauri. This is, as Beth would say, have astronomers found a habitable planet at Alpha Centauri? ? Because it is a long shot, but essentially the sort of the bigger exciting news is that astronomers have developed some pretty amazing new techniques for directly imaging planets around other stars, and they think they see some kind of evidence of either a mini Neptune or a super Earth, something that's maybe 3-4 times the size of the Earth in orbit around Alpha Centauri, and it's in the habitable zone. Now, it could be dust. Okay, come on, let's just agree. It's almost certainly dust.
Let's run through it, right? We have dust. Not aliens.
Not aliens, planets, but still. And so the most powerful telescope on Earth, the Very Large Telescope, using its espresso instrument, which is a tool for being able to essentially reveal planets orbiting around other stars, was able to detect this. So right now it's really preliminary, but like I said, this is kind of breaking just today. We're all over it at Universe Today, but I wanted to give you guys the sneak preview of that. The other really interesting announcement that we got today was that NASA has selected SpaceX to fly the first component of the Lunar Gateway on a Falcon Heavy. So up until this point, the plan was to try to launch. Originally the idea was we're going to launch all the parts of the Lunar Gateway on the Space Launch System. And for whatever reason, the Space Launch System has gotten a little bit delayed, and maybe they're considering other launch providers. And so they've looked at various, NASA was considering the Blue Origin, the Blue Origin New Glenn, which is still under construction. We haven't seen these things fly yet, so the timeline doesn't work out right. There are heavier versions of the United Launch Alliance rockets, but even those don't really have a kind of the raw launch capability. The Delta IV Heavy is a pretty monstrous rocket, but it's not quite heavy enough. And so you're looking at the Falcon Heavy as sort of the most ready, heaviest launch vehicle that's out there, and it's cheap. It's $90 million a launch. And so NASA has announced today that they're gonna launch the first component of the Lunar Gateway on a Falcon Heavy. And I think in the end there's going to be a total of 4 components. The first one I think is the power system, but then over time you're going to have 4 total launches to build the gateway. Although it might be more if a smaller machine than the Space Launch System is used. But this is kind of an important change because you have, and we're also hearing that Europa Clipper will probably launch on a Falcon Heavy. So you're seeing this shift from all of these missions that were earmarked on the heavier Space Launch System starting to shift towards some of these other launch providers, and especially the Falcon Heavy, which I think a lot of people had considered a fairly long shot. But now it's been, the Air Force is using it. NASA has, some commercial providers have used the Falcon Heavy. And so I think we are now at the point where you're going to see a lot of this stuff go. Just as SpaceX sunsets the Falcon Heavy in replacement for the Starship. But obviously, that's going to be a couple of years before we see that thing carry cargo to space. It still can't quite stick the landing. So anyway, it's kind of a big day for a lot of interesting stuff. It's a big week and it's a big day. So I'm kind of excited about everything that's happening. All right.
I'm not surprised at the Falcon Heavy decision. I think it's been so successful that I would have been surprised if they hadn't said, yeah, we're going to do part of this.
I totally agree. Like, there was no reason that you had to launch these all on the Space Launch System. Like, the Falcon Heavy can do it. And it's cheaper and it's seemingly reliable at this point. So it makes a ton of sense. Like, you can't always recover all your boosters, but that thing will take your cargo to space. So I think it's good. And I think it's, when you look at the array of options that NASA has available to it, both for cargo and for human beings, there's a lot that SpaceX brings to the table at this point. And in theory, the other providers are coming on quick. New Glenn, the Vulcan from United Launch Alliance. So I think there's going to be a lot of options. So, it's just like the Space Launch System is just, it's going to be tested in like another 3 weeks. We're going to see another hot fire test. So we'll see what happens with that. All right. Well, we've reached the end of our hour. Carolyn, you're on my screen right now. So why don't you tell people what you're up to and where people can find out more?
Well, I'll be watching another attempt at the spaceship launch. Let's hope it sticks the landing.
SN10, you're up.
Pardon me?
SN10?
No, number 10. Yeah. I had a laugh last week, and they said, well, we landed close to the pad. Just wasn't a very good landing.
Yeah.
I'm working on revisions for a book, and other than that, you can follow me at thespacewriter.com, and I'm on Twitter at @spacewriter.
Wonderful. Michael, what are you working on?
I'm at Twitter at Michael Roderick, and we are getting ready for another Astronomy on Tap. February 22nd, we're going to be talking about dust and Dyson spheres. So, those two go together. We'll figure out a way to make them match. So,
what you think is a Dyson sphere is always dust? I think is how that works.
We can, we'll see if we can bring in a Tabby Star into that.
Perfect.
That topic as well, I guess.
Awesome. Beth.
I'm Planetary Pan basically everywhere, and the two things I am working on that I want to push are that we are doing the SETI Live for the Perseverance landing.
Which we all learned about.
Yep, the same time that NASA's running theirs. So we'll be doing ours. We'll have a bunch of guests. And also the next day on the 19th, we are doing a special Grudge Report live with Dr. Aaron McDonald to talk about this past season of Star Trek Discovery. So it's going to be a live, so bring your questions and be nice. And that should be fun. She's amazing, and I'm so thrilled that the season's over, which means her NDA is done for the season, so we can ask her some questions.
Well, I mean, it's great to have. I mean, we had her on the Weekly Space Hangout thanks to you, I think. But scientifically, it's great on Discovery. And that's all Aaron's fault. Okay, well, I'm going to put everybody on the screen here. I have nothing interesting to talk about. We've got a ton of good stuff on Universe Today. Subscribe to my newsletter. You know the drill. All right, so Fraser, Kane, Universe Today, all the things. F. Kane. All right. Anyway, thank you, everybody, for joining us this week. Thanks for a special guest. Thanks to my co-hosts. Thanks to our good friends at the Weekly Space Hangout crew, and especially Nancy, organizing everything. Graziano. We couldn't do this without you, Nancy. Thanks for watching, and we will see all of you next week with Avi Loeb. So join us for that. See you then.